Welcome. Welcome to this luncheon for us ladies on World Menopause Day. Um, I was just reflecting earlier today when I was teaching my morning class how far I've come individually and how far all of my friends and my colleagues have come over these past years since we all kind of started going through the perimenopausal journey. And I just thought that this is a really lovely opportunity for us to all just push pause, come break bread together, sit down and share. And I wanted to pull together a couple of my colleagues who have got different skills from me and different strengths to their bow, or strengths to their bow strengths, to help share some of the wisdoms that we wish we had kind of known the importance of and implemented a little bit earlier on in our own journeys. Because although now we work in this field and we try and share as much information as we can and we try and empower other women, it doesn't mean that we haven't been through a shit show of a journey ourselves, because we absolutely have. Maybe everybody who would just raise your hand if the reason you're here is because you've had a bit of a journey yourself. Yeah. Amazing. Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. You are in the right place. And as you're joining, hi, I'm Linda Stevens. We've got Irina Pretorius with us today. We've got Sue Ella, and we've got a whole lot of wonderful peri to postmenopausal women as well. Do you know, given that the same hormones that allow us to get pregnant, sustain a pregnancy, allow us to bring human beings into this world and sustain the population. It is crazy that, we've known about puberty, we've known about having our periods, we've known about pregnancy, we've known about the postpartum period, but until quite recently, so little has been known about the menopause journey. And yet, the same hormones that help us to create babies also work in about 400 different pathways in our bodies and our brains. They literally operate, they are the operating system of this vessel that we are living this lifetime through. And 100% of us women, every single woman on the planet, will go through the menopause. And I'm sure all of you know that the word menopause is simply a term that is used for that moment in time when we haven't had a period for 12 months. But it's before that. It's the 2 to 12 years. 4 years is common, is average, of hormonal changes and often symptoms that we're going to be kind of focusing on today. The perimenopause. Some stats: 13 million women in the UK are currently in that period to postmenopausal stage. It's the fastest growing workforce demographic. So although the natural menopause is that term that we're using for 12 months of no periods, 1 in 100 women will experience an early menopause. So that's quite a bit earlier than the average of 51 years. So early menopause might happen before 40. And there are a significant number of women who will also go through a surgical menopause. So a sudden menopause brought on by surgery where the ovaries are taken away. There could be a medical menopause where, if there's been cancer treatment, if there's been some kind of medical treatment that it puts those ovaries into recession earlier on than is average, is normal. So there's a lot of reasons why our ovaries shut up shop, aside from just that natural decline in our ovarian production. And what's so interesting is that for most of us, we think that menopause is something, well, probably not those of you who are on the call right now, but I know I certainly thought that menopause was something that happened to people in their kind of 50s and 60s, and they'd have a few hot flashes and then periods would stop and away you go. I had no idea how early we actually start to go into the perimenopausal phase of our lives. For myself, I think that when I went, so after I had my third baby at 40, I don't think I ever went from being in that postnatal collapse of progesterone and estrogen, back into being, going back to those peri-menopausal levels of hormones. I think I went straight into perimenopause. I just didn't know that all the symptoms that I was experiencing at that stage had to do with the fact that I was in the early stages of my ovaries stopping me being able to have babies anymore. So 75% of women are going to experience symptoms, disrupting symptoms. 25% won't really experience any symptoms at all. But of that 75%, 25% will experience really quite discombobulating symptoms that are life disrupting. And the symptoms are crazy. They're really disparate. I've just listed some of them. So obviously much worse PMT. As we lose progesterone, we're going to be having much worse PMT. Extreme fatigue. I'm sure many of you will have experienced that lead blanket-like fatigue. Massive mood swings. Like, put your hand up if you've ever been in a situation where like the monster is erupting and afterwards you're like, where did that come from? And then that horrible sense of guilt. Who is that person? Yeah. Brain fog, word loss, not being able to do all the things that you used to be able to do. You used to be able to be really sharp and just pivot and take on a whole lot of projects, and suddenly, like, where's your brain gone? It's that feeling of there is nothing going on behind the eyes. Low to no libido, like, you know, yes, he or she is attractive, but there's just nothing, there's just no desire. Insomnia. Hands up who has experienced insomnia. It's one of the worst symptoms. Skin itchiness, a feeling of ants literally being underneath your skin, dry eyes, dry mouth, sharp electric eel kind of shocks down your arms and legs, numbness in fingers and toes, weight gain around the middle, pelvic floor discomfort, pain, urinary urgency, urinary frequency, stress incontinence issues, breast tenderness and lumpiness, dizziness, in my case, vertigo, quite common, not just uncommon. Of course, the forgetfulness, the memory loss, and of course, yes, the irregular periods, sometimes incredibly heavy, sometimes very light and scanty, and many, many more. I've just listed a few, many, many more. Progesterone is the hormone that we start to lose first of all. So often the highlight is on estrogen, but actually when we start to have anovulatory cycles where we don't actually ovulate in the middle of our cycle, we're not going to be producing progesterone. Progesterone is our chill out hormone. So it's the hormone that helps us to sleep. It's the hormone that helps us to go, yes, I will make you one dinner and you one dinner, and yes, you one dinner because you won't eat that and that, and yes, I will pair everyone's socks. And when the progesterone goes, it's like, fuck you all, get your own bloody dinner, you know, pair your own socks. Yeah, so progesterone is the calming hormone. And early symptoms of perimenopause are often those psychological symptoms, the brain fog, the memory loss, that inability to keep that monster at bay. And also progesterone, very important in our gut action. So often women will start to have much worse IBS, think that they might be, you know, do have Crohn's. Suddenly they can't process grains like they used to, dairy like they used to. And then estrogen, we tend to start losing estrogen a bit later, around mid-40s. And estrogen, of course, is the main component, the main generator of our bones, our muscles, our skin, our hair, the lubrication in our body. Our heart health relies on good estrogen. Our pelvic area, Arena's going to be talking about this, our pelvic area is very dominated by estrogen receptors. So we can start to quite suddenly experience a new, exciting new range of symptoms once our estrogen starts to, unfortunately, not just slowly drop down, kind of like progesterone does, but estrogen does this wonderful big sort of burst and then retraction, burst and then retraction, as our ovaries are like, one more baby, one more baby. And as the estrogen declines, it does this. And then we have testosterone. Women actually produce about 10 times as much, no, 4 times as much testosterone as we do estrogen, but we have a tenth of the testosterone that men have. And yet we know that, you know, we up until very recently, we've kind of been acting like little men. We've been pushing through in life as if we have the same testosterone levels as men do. Testosterone is the hormone that gives us our get up and go, our drive, our ability to push through. It helps our metabolism, our libido. It gives us that energy. It gives us that ability just to, you know, get that deadline done on a Friday night and then go out Friday night for drinks and then get up in the morning and go for a run. So once we start to lose our testosterone, it's really important that we start to look after our adrenals in particular. So that kind of brings me on to what happens when these hormones are depleted and what we can be doing to help ourselves feel better, function better, so that once we get over to the other side of menopause, we can step into those wisdom years in a way that is really empowering and really impactful. What else did I just want to say in this bit here? Yeah, no, really, that for me, and I'm just going to open up to the other two in a second here, but for me, my key takeaways that I would want every woman to know, and I hope that all of this will be starting to be taught in schools in the not too distant future, is, first of all, unfortunately, like any of you who've got a child who's got extra needs of any sort, you know that you have to be their biggest advocate as their mum. You have to be the biggest support person, because unfortunately, although we can find different doctors that might be able to help us, nobody actually cares about your child the way you do. And it's the same with each of us as individual women. All of our experiences will be different, because just like Sue processes food in a different way than I do, Irina has to have different food than I do, we all have totally different makeups of the 44 trillion cells in our bodies. All of us have got different patterns with our hormones. All of us are going to have different issues going on. And we've all got to become our own biggest advocates, our own researchers, and our own project managers. I'm going to say project managers, yeah. So one is get educated, you know, attend things like this, ask questions, and surround yourself with the people who are going to support that. I know with my son Patrick, who's got a neuromuscular disorder and has had lots of issues in his lifetime, I've come across lots of doctors who'd be like, "Oh God, you're an internet mum, aren't you? You're, you know," and poo-pooed what I have done to support him. And so I've had to not go into my people pleasing, they are in a white coat, so they know better than me, I'll shut up mode, but go into project management mode and go, literally, you're not supporting my cause, so I'm cutting you off. You're supporting my cause, I'm going to learn from you, do my own research and things, and create my own knowledge base. And we kind of need to do that now for ourselves in this phase, especially when we're still, you know, even the last couple of years, there's been a tsunami of new information. And we've gone from nothing to almost too much and too disparate information. We've got to be able to filter. And if we can't filter at the moment because we've got too much brain fog, trust in one or two people that can help filter for you. Yeah. So my biggest education, I think, has been around the not pushing through, that realizing acceptance. In yoga we call this Santosha. It's acceptance that this phase of life, which is only 10 years maximum really, of maybe the 80 or 90 years we might be on this planet, that this phase of our lives is not a time to necessarily, if you're somebody who is experiencing a lot of symptoms, not a time to also change the world. It's a time to seal up the vessel. You know, I don't really like the word self-care because it has a lot of, you know, I'm going to the spa, I'm going to have my nails done connotations. But whatever self-care actually means to you, in one of many circles, we call this the needs creep. You know, what things that you need to do for yourself that's going to get you and your hormone landscape to a level of being okay, where the monster doesn't erupt so much, where you don't have such extreme brain fog. So looking after the adrenal glands, and I'll talk in a minute about what that means for me. So that was the one thing. My key education has been that this is not a time to prove myself. This is not a time to continue to try and be a little man in a skirt, push through, juggle all the balls. Like, I know, Alrina, you've had this lovely analogy, and I'm just going to say it again now because I love it, where we all juggle balls in life. Yeah, we've all juggled, you know, we've all got our careers, our work, our parents, our children, the food we, you know, our health. We're juggling all of these balls, our social media, our social lives. But really only one of the balls is crystal, and that is our health. If we let that ball drop and smash, all the other balls will come tumbling down too. Everything else is rubber, can bounce, and we can go back and change things. Our health is something that we really can't let go of. Also like the analogy of a rubber band, you know. So through our 20s and our 30s, and certainly in our teens, where our health is like a rubber band, and we can stretch it and it'll go back, stretch it, we'll go back, stretch it, we'll go back. Once we lose these key hormones, if we keep stretching, eventually that rubber just doesn't come back, and we go into that stage of being adrenally exhausted, and that exacerbates all of our symptoms. So I'm going to just stop here. I've got a few other things I'd like to add in a moment, but I'd love to hand over maybe first to Alrina, who is a pelvic floor physiotherapist. As I mentioned, the pelvic area is very estrogen rich. She has been on her own huge journey as well. And I just would love to ask you, Alrina, what are some of the key things that in your journey you wish you had known earlier on?
I suppose I wish I had asked for help sooner, sort of recognizing those symptoms for what they were. And, you know, at that time, early on in my early 40s, I thought I was too young for menopause. I didn't really know about peri-menopause, to be honest with you. And I was kind of doing everything wrong, really driving the adrenals. You know, I decided at that point of my life, I was going through a divorce, and then I decided to go do CrossFit for somebody who's hypermobile, and then, you know, end up with prolapse of all the organs because you're jumping around and bouncing, and, you know, not being supported from an estrogen point of view, not eating enough protein, but using that as kind of my management for other bits, you know, to help me with my concentration, or to help me with my mood, or to help me with, you know, other bits and bobs. But the damage that was done.
You were using exercise to help you manage the brain fog and all the rest of it, not realize that the old style of exercise, what you were doing, same as 20s and 30s kind of thing, was actually now damaging,
harmful. So it's like, I like to think about it as a bank account, right? Sometimes you're making deposits and sometimes you're making withdrawals into that bank account. Now, exercise can be either a deposit or withdrawal, depending on what type of exercise you do, you know, how you do it, when you do it, how well you know, your nutrition is matching that exercise. If you're hypermobile or not, you know, what type of exercise you should be doing. if I go and do, like, sometimes if I do yoga because I'm hypermobile, I can injure myself because I don't always know where my joint needs to stop. So I love to think of all of these things we do, whether you eat, whether you sleep, whether you exercise, whether your relationship, all these things are either deposits or withdrawals. And thinking of, like, am I overdrawn? So I think what happened to me in my early 40s to mid 40s is I was quite overdrawn, and thinking I was making deposits, but actually I was making these massive withdrawals with these health behaviors, if you like. But also, by the time I actually got to my GP for some help, they were so dismissive, and it wasn't now, like, well, even now some of my patients get dismissed, to be honest with you, but there's a lot more knowledge out there now. But as you say, it can be really overwhelming for women because they go, oh, I don't know which direction, where do I look? Everybody's trying to talk about menopause, right? So I think finding that journey and finding a reputable source. I love the British Menopause Society for information. It's non-biased, it's scientifically backed, it's not just emotional. Do you know what I mean? Because it can easily be quite an emotional space. And I'm quite left brain, so I quite like to have my facts straight. So I did my training with the British Menopause Society, and then recognized that actually I probably would have done quite well starting some kind of hormone replacement therapy, or changing my diet, or changing my exercise, or all those things, and always think of it as belt and braces approach from quite early on in my 40s, rather than waiting till quite late on in my 40s to actually get started with those behaviors. So I just wish I knew sooner how damaging some of the things that I was doing was for me, because now I'm living with the consequences of a shoulder injury, a hip issue, a prolapse, had I known those things sooner, possibly intervening or changing the behavior, intervening in some other way, supporting myself with protein and collagen and stuff like that would have been very helpful to know. So I just try to educate my patients, and also point them in the direction of where do you find help, right? The Women's Health Concern.org website is brilliant for help and advice, non-biased,
Say that again, Irina. Which website did you
the British Menopause Society have a patient arm, and it's called Women's Health-Concern.org. And on there,
chat?
I'll pop that in the chat, yeah.
Or Sam, do you find that one, please?
They're not going to be talking particularly, I don't think, about nutrition and all the other things that are super important, but more the medical view, right? So if you just want that information of what is this and why that and what are the risk factors for that, that's quite an objective place to go with those in my life. And then there's, Menopause Matters is a great website to do something like your green climacteric score. If you just want to know, am I in perimenopause? Because women come in and they go, well, I didn't have any hot flushes, right? I had terrible night sweats, but I've been having night sweats since my 20s. And the fact that they got worse wasn't a huge flag for me that I was now in perimenopause. I had no idea that the itchy skin that was keeping me awake all night was a perimenopausal symptom. It drove me nuts. My husband couldn't cuddle me because I was like, oh, I'm itchy. And of course, that affects your relationship. You're like, don't touch me. And then all the genitourinary symptoms of the menopause, right? Constant UTIs, pain with sex. I don't think there was any dryness going on, but bloody hell, every time you had sex, there was a UTI. And I'm like, oh, another course of antibiotics. That messes up your gut, and round the houses you go.
So important. And, I've just been teaching about it this morning, actually. Could you just, because I think, ladies, 50% of women don't exercise because of pelvic floor issues. So this is huge. And it's 70-80% they reckon are going to experience some form of pelvic floor issues in their lifetime. And of course, once we lose that estrogen, it's just it's crazy how what you just said, I think, was mind-blowing for me, because I thought I had I did have great pelvic floor function. What I didn't realize is once we lose this estrogen deeper in the pelvic bowl, levator ani, the different muscles that hold our organs in place, they also lose their strength and elasticity.
They bulk. So they lose bulk, they lose strength, they lose elasticity. Some studies that have been done on female athletes really show, like with that estrogen drop first day of the period, how they injure so much more. But now you've got to think you've got that concept. Like yesterday, you could go do a box jump and a double under, if you know what I mean by that, an explosive. But today you can't, because today your estrogen is down here. Yesterday it was up there. Today it's down here. Tomorrow it's up there. So you actually don't know where you're at with your estrogen in perimenopause. I love postmenopause. It's brilliant. You know exactly where you are. Like, that's it. Whereas perimenopause, you're like, oh my God, I feel great today. I can go and train. But if you're a person who's kind of routine focused, you want to go do that stuff all the time, right? So you don't want to listen to your body and go, I feel like lead today, everything feels stiff and tight, but I felt fine yesterday, I could do this yesterday. Your body just isn't the same today as yesterday. And that's where the yoga approach is so great, where you literally think of that Santosha, where am I? How do I feel? You know, is that okay for me to do today? Is it a deposit or withdrawal to do this, whatever this behavior is today? But thinking of the pelvic floor, if your muscles and your body feel tight, your shoulder hurts, you know, your hips tight, you can trust yourself that your pelvic floor muscles are also going to be shorter, tighter, less elastic. They just, I don't have my model here, but it's just musculoskeletal stuff in a cave, right? It's all the same stuff. It's just inside in a cave.
So would you have started vulva and vaginal estrogen supplementation earlier, do you think? Or, you know,
I wish I had. I honestly wish I had. I mean, even if I hadn't started HRT at that point, starting vaginal estrogen sooner would have been hugely helpful for me.
Yeah.
And I really recommend that, because most of my population that I see are post-natal and peri-menopausal, because we're having our children later. They're often having that second baby at 38 or even later. They never recover hormonally from that. They go straight from that into perimenopause, and those hormones are just never quite there. And of course, you might have been breastfeeding first baby for a year, then you fall pregnant, have second baby, breastfeed baby for another 9 months, a year, whatever it is. That's a long time to be without a decent form of estrogen in your vagina, right? And then, whoops, now you're in perimenopause, but you still feel really young. You've just had babies, you're still dealing with all that stuff, maybe elderly parents, all that load on both sides. And you're not paying attention to the fact that suddenly you keep getting UTIs, or you're starting to leak, and you think, oh, that's just a postnatal symptom, but actually some estrogen could have been super helpful for you in that period, even if you don't stay on it for long. But that postnatal period could be helpful while you're breastfeeding. And then in those early 40s, I think it should almost just be, like women should be told, just have some and see how you feel.
Yeah, ladies, it's really important to understand. Is talking about the vaginal and vulval cream, or little pessary, like a little pill that you put up the vagina, or a ring which does a slow release of this the hormone of estrogen, or estradiol or estriol. It's very, very low dose, and it doesn't go into the bloodstream, so it's not the same as HRT, which is now called menopause hormone therapy. It's a different product. Unfortunately, still the insert inside these products is basically exactly the same insert as.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because it's misinformation, really.
It is.
And particularly for women who've been, put into surgical menopause, or who have been chemically. I've got a friend who's chemically in menopause now because of her
from surgical medical.
Endometriosis and migraines. So she's trying to, sorry, Lynn, no, you can't get the cream over the counter. You can get the pessary over the counter. It's called Gina, and that's estradiol, whereas the cream is estriol. So it's much lower dose cream. So it's super safe, like super safe. Most of the menopause doctors I speak to are quite happy to give it for their patients, even who've had, breast cancer and stuff like that, who are in a chemical menopause because of tamoxifen. So there's just so much help that we can give women down there to make life a bit more comfortable. And the scary statistic.
UTIs, I think that's a big thing, because so many.
Well, that's what I'm going to say now, is the
antibiotics.
UTIs is what causes sepsis for women and how they die. One, it's the main reason we go into nursing homes is being incontinent, probably because of an estrogen deficiency at some level, and pelvic floor dysfunction that comes from partially that in childbirth. But then there's this, UTI after UTI, and eventually sepsis and death. And it sounds very dramatic, but if you look at the statistics, if we're not taking care of our vaginas, that's what happens. So it's one of the quickest, easiest ways to help a woman with almost no downside. So I don't know why it's not just standard care. And as you say, it should just be available over the counter. The estradiol is, but the estriol isn't, the cream.
You should be able to put an e-consult into your nurse practitioner, your GP surgery, and just say, I need vaginal estrogen. I'm, experiencing increased leaking, discomfort down there, and be able to at least try that for 2 or 3 months, see how it goes. Whether you choose to also get body identical HRT or not. That's
yeah. So there's lots of reasons for people to either be or not be on HRT, but that's more of a, you're just sorting out the issue where it's at.
Yeah, actually, Alrina, because you are a hormone expert as well, could you just speak to, um, you know, the possibility of using progesterone earlier on in that journey? Because as I was saying before, we lose our progesterone, most of us from about 38 will start to have these anovulatory cycles.
Yeah.
So we actually lose about 70% of our progesterone between 35 and 50 before we actually go through menopause itself. Whereas estrogen, it's about 35%, I think it is. So
Yeah.
for, for probably many women, it's not necessarily, earlier on in that journey, it can be incredibly helpful just to up level.
Certainly from a mood and sleep point of view. And there are two ways to take the progesterone. It could just be a pessary if you are taking HRT and you have a sensitivity to progesterone, because that can be the case for some people as well. You can just do it as a pessary, which would then just protect your uterine lining. Okay, so that's not going to have a systemic effect. Because if you take it orally, it's the same tablet, you can take it orally. That's quite soporific. So you'll feel more sleepy, you'll feel calmer, it'll help with your mood and so on. So as you say, if your estrogen levels are still good and your progesterone levels are really not great and you're struggling with mood swings and sleep and even aches and pains to some degree, progesterone can be super helpful as well. So yeah, but again, depending, this is where you need a hormone expert really to talk you through it, because you need to know if you've had certain symptoms as a teenager that you can see you might be a bit more sensitive to progesterone or changes in progesterone later on. So what I find with some of my clients, when they put on HRT and they have a 2-week on, 2-week off period, so they're still having a cycle, so they're still having a bleed, even if it's not ovulatory bleed. It's that shift from on and off that can be troublesome for them. And for somebody who has a sensitivity to either the progesterone or the change of progesterone level, it could be helpful to stay on it. So you actually stop having a cycle at all. So that was the case with me. I spoke to Simone Rowe, who's up in Levitas Clinic, about it, and she put me on it and said just stay on it, and it was really life changing. Not being on and off, so just having that level. So yeah, it can be. I mean, I love progesterone. I'd take more if I.
I would suggest anyone who's really interested in learning more about the hormones, Lara Biden's The Hormone Repair Manual and the Period Repair Manual are books that are great to understand your cycle, understand what's happening as we start going through that perimenopausal journey. So Sue, could you come off mute, darling, and just pitch in with, now Sue's a healthy eating expert and coach, and she's been on her own huge journey to get to the stage where she is now, and so I just thought it'd be great if she could pitch in with some of her key takeaways about what has changed her journey the most.
Yeah, thank you, Linda, and thanks for inviting me on, because this is, as you know, very close to my heart. So my journey is a little bit different. I didn't come into this thinking I need to ease my menopause symptoms. I came into my transformation because I was desperate to get a handle on my weight my whole life. It was always about dieting and feeling like a failure at diets, feeling uncomfortable in my body, feeling judged for being larger. After I had my children, the heaviest that I got was about a size 18 to 20, and I just felt really uncomfortable at that, and I just didn't feel like the real me. And so dieting wasn't working for me, and it just struck me that dieting just wasn't natural or healthy. It just seemed to go against everything that I felt I knew to be sensible. The deprivation, there's low fat, encouraging you to eat diet products, and it just didn't make any sense to me. And I thought, this isn't work. One, it's not working, and two, I don't think it's healthy. So I kept around the age of 40. I'm 53 now. Around the age of 40, I made a decision that I was going to stop dieting and look for the real solution, the more natural approach, because I knew that nature didn't want me to be more, to carry more fat than I needed, right? So I found I was aged about 49 during lockdown, stumbled across a program that was all about eating in the way that human beings are designed to eat. Okay, and it was about tuning into your body and getting your nutritional needs met first. So long story very short, Linda, it was a 90-day program and I released a couple of dress sizes, 20 pounds in weight. But here's the thing. What I didn't know was there for me was a complete transformation of my energy, my minor ailments, and the one big thing that was causing me a lot of problems, and that was joint pain and stiffness in particular. So I was 49, but I'd been experiencing this stiffness probably for 15 years, maybe 20 years. So it may have been early perimenopause, but it wasn't necessarily. It was chronic inflammation in the body. And I didn't know, because I was asking everybody who would listen, can you tell me what this stiffness is? Because it's really debilitating. I couldn't come down the stairs in the morning some days without basically crawling, holding onto the banister. Do you know what I mean? And putting 2 feet on one step. There was so much stiffness in my body and I didn't know it was to do with food. So my top takeaway, the top thing that I wish I knew in my 20s, let alone 30s, is the way we're eating has a massive impact, not just on weight, but on the way we feel in our bodies, that joint pain, that stiffness. And as a result of changing the way I was eating, and it's a simple way of eating, but it's not necessarily easy. I'm going to come to that in a bit. As a result of that, all my minor ailments disappeared. And some of those minor ailments I now know were perimenopause. Because I was now 49, right? So I was experiencing, hadn't really paid much attention to it. I had been experiencing brain fog, night sweats, erratic mood. What else? Probably some insomnia. I would never really tuned into it back then. But looking back, I was tired all the time. And changed the way I was eating to a much more natural diet aligned with nature, natural whole foods, but some surprise things, because I always thought I was a healthy eater because I ate, I knew about fruit and veg and I included at least my 5 a day, and I swapped refined grains for whole grains. I swapped my standard porridge for jumbo organic oats, but there was so much that I didn't know that human beings aren't designed to eat. And so what disappeared? All the minor ailments, acid reflux, skin conditions improved, odd little things like cold sores, athlete's foot, little fungal skin thing that would pop up every now and again. Yeah, all that gone. So my top learning point that I wish I knew is that it's so much more to do with food than we realize.
And alcohol.
Yeah, absolutely. Food and drink, right? And when I say food, I mean alcohol too. And I mean how much water we're getting. Hydration is a massive point. You've seen me here. I've gone through a pint and a half already.
Yep.
I had no idea how much mood swings and all those other ailments, dry skin, dry feet, flaky, breaking nails, torn, those horrible, painful hangnails, all to do with not drinking enough water. Skin condition, all to do with not drinking enough water. So if that's point 1B, right?
Right. And all of that, essentially, ladies, it's our livers. Once we get to the stage where we're having to process hormones so much more, our livers need, just like our adrenal glands, they need love and attention. And we like to talk about, thinking about your gut biome. There's so many more, we've got this extraordinary gut biome. All of our gut biomes are very different. And thinking about all the things you can put in, the nutrients you can put in to feed, like if you think of a wildflower garden, fabulous English wildflower paddock, as opposed to weeds. And every time we drink alcohol, eat refined sugar, for many of us, once we start losing that estrogen and progesterone, we don't process grains, particularly gluten as well. We don't process dairy products as well. So all of the things that are taxing our system, processing all the E numbers, that's growing the weeds. Every time we put in good amounts of, you know, our omega-3s, our good oils, our good sources of protein, all of our vegetables and herbs and spices, all of the things that grow the flowers that improve our gut biome, all of those things, our liver is going, yay. And every time we have our water and our herbal drinks, etc., the liver's going, yay. And you're getting better and better ability for your body to go into that homeostatic state. Every time we put that burden in to our bodies, liver's just getting clogged up. And as Sue was describing, we see it in our skin, in our joints, stiffness, the bags, yeah.
I'm so glad you described that, Linda, because I love that analogy of the flower garden and the weeds. And here's the thing for me, you use the word homeostasis, right? For me, it's just there is a natural state of wellness that we are being removed from because of the way we're being fed. And other lifestyle factors, of course, but you know that for me, it starts with food. And now I can appreciate symptoms in a completely reverse light. My symptoms now are wisdom showing me that I've eaten something wrong.
Yes, oh, I like that. Yeah.
So
Great.
there's quite a few. So we're subject to so many symptoms, aren't we? When we you know, in the old days when we're not eating so well, so many symptoms, migraines and the stiff joints and the skin and the poor sleep and the low energy and the irritability, and there's all these signals bombarded, and when we experience them all. When we have this transition to eating completely clean, which is the transformation that I give my clients on this little bit of a boot camp, they experience what it's like for a while to eat completely clean. You get into this situation where everything improves. And when everything improves, now any little symptoms like, okay, last night I got into bed, my feet were dry, slightly dry, scratchy on the bedclothes. Of course, I hadn't drank enough water that evening. I was dehydrated. Another little one for me is, I'm not wearing my rings, my wedding rings. When my wedding rings get tight, I look back at what I ate the day before, because there's absolutely something that I ate consciously with choice. It might have been some, I don't know, maybe it was a pastry, or maybe it was maybe I'd been out and we'd had a glass of wine and, some whatever. But I go, yes, that's why I'm inflamed today, because of the choices I made yesterday. So that's a little test that I do every single day, is test how tight my rings are. And another one that in little tiny symptoms of chronic inflammation creeping in, and it's very short time scales. If I look in the mirror in the morning and I've got this little bag under one eye that grows if I've eaten something off plan the day before. And it's only me that's aware of it. I don't think anybody would say, we got bags under your eyes, but I just noticed that there's a little bag that just puffs up, and I go, what did I eat yesterday? Of course, it was the gin and tonic, or whatever it was. You know what I mean? So it's little signals. So I've now come to appreciate these signals, whatever it is, as being an indication that I haven't eaten so well the last day or the last week. And I'll tell you a little story that happened to me last Christmas. So generally speaking, I'm 80% on plan, 80-90% clean, and 10-20% free choice, right? Gastronomy, conscious gastronomy. But last Christmas, we had a visitor from Uganda, and he was cooking for us, and there was a lot of sweetness in the foods that we were eating. There's a lot of rice, there was a lot of bananas, cooked bananas, and the sweet cravings kept in, and I was back on the chocolate, and you name it. He went off for a walk without his phone. He's from Uganda, right? And I couldn't see where he was. I didn't know where he was, and I panicked. I had what I now believe is, people call it a bit of a ADHD meltdown, but you could call it PMT, an erratic mood swing. And I lost the plot. And I was panicking and shouting and crying and telling the kids, like, what's going, you're not doing anything to help. And I look back at that and I realise I used to be like that all the time. That's how I used to be when the kids were little, before I changed the way I was eating. Whether it's ADHD, whether it's PMT, it's an imbalance. And it's an imbalance primarily of blood sugars, probably the gut's out of balance. And now I know I can count on one hand, I can count on one finger the number of times I've had a meltdown in the last year, and that was it. Whereas
Mm.
before it was a weekly thing. So I now know that, like, I've proven it in myself, that it's also so much to do with our mental well-being as well.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
When your sugar levels are all over the show, your mood's going to be all over the show.
Yeah.
You know, energy levels. If you still want to keep going and your energy levels are low, then that also affects your mood, right?
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly.
I think just what I just got, one of the main things I got out of what you were just saying about our bodies becoming a beacon of information, you know, and I always talk about in yoga, this is our vessel that we're experiencing life through. So you want to look after the vessel, you know, this is so important. And once we start, and yoga is brilliant for allowing us to start tuning into, you know, getting out of the head and actually being able to feel into these 44 or so trillion cells, this condensed energy that makes up our body. And when we are tuned in, and when we are a bit cleaner with what our body is having to process, and we're thinking of the what we put into our mouths, and you think about all those 44 trillion cells, they are created from what we put into our body. So if that was just a whole lot of pasta and cheese, I would be having a different my cells, my brain, everything would be feeling different. My blood sugar levels would be feeling very different than they are when I feed the cells with the stuff that's making my,
Yeah.
you know, the flowers bloom in the garden as opposed to the weeds. What I was going to say is that you're so, like, the body holds the score, doesn't it? The body holds the score. It will tell us with headaches, with skin eruptions, with, you know, aching, tightness, with pelvic floor dysfunction issues spiking. The body tells us when it is not happy.
Yeah.
And it's up to us to read the signals. And you know, it's very hard to do that, especially in those early perimenopausal days when you are brain fogged and you're not yet doing all of these things that can help us
Yeah.
get to being a
Yeah,
clear.
it's good to look at it as feedback, right? It's just feedback. Any symptoms you have is feedback. And then it's like being a detective and, like you said, a project manager.
Yeah.
But it is hard when you have that cog fog and you can't see the wood for the trees, or when there's so much going on for you that you don't notice. I mean, you're at that level of, as you say, inflammation, Sue, that, you know, nothing seems to make a difference to that until you bring it all the way down. And then you notice those little spikes, and you can be so specific about what you know you can and can't cope with. I cut out alcohol a few years ago, and it's now so obvious to me if I have any alcohol, it literally wipes out the effects of any estrogen in my body altogether. You know, I can't think straight, my body hurts. And I mean, if I feel like having alcohol, I will do, but it's just rare for me to actually feel like it's worth having for the impact that it has on me, mood, sleep, musculoskeletally, you know, pelvic floor, UTIs, you know, just feeling irritated in the bladder.
And you know what? This theory that it's all feedback and it's all wisdom. I will take this theory even further, because what I believe menopause is turning us into the wise women of the tribe. Younger people and men can get away with a lot of things. They can get away with eating a lot of sugar. They can get away with the dairy and the refined carbs because they don't really notice it in their bodies, right? They probably do. But when you get to menopause, it goes like boom. So we're like, I've noticed that when I eat this, I feel it in my body. I get these symptoms. We're the wise women. We're going to teach our communities it's not good to eat. We are the sensitive ones. You know, when you say that we become more sensitive to dairy, we become more sensitive to refined grains. They're not human foods. We didn't evolve to eat those foods. And so it's no wonder that in perimenopause we get more sensitive to those, because we're meant to be telling our communities, don't eat that shit.
Yeah. So maybe the loss, because of course the progesterone and the estrogen in particular, it helps us mask all that stuff. You know, you look at teenagers, golly, do you remember when you were like 18, you could just drink like a fish and after you go
Exactly.
to bed the next morning, you're fine. I always say to my daughter when she does that, I'm like, you've got a ton of estrogen, you know, enjoy it while it's there. you'll be like me one day. So um, I think that whole calming things down, like getting to that stage where it's acceptance, like it is that going, stepping into the wisdom years, being able to be that beacon for other women and you know, other, being the you know, the whales, because was it killer whales or any other species that have menopause, and it's the matriarchs that run those pods of killer whales, and wise women, if we have allowed ourselves to let go of trying to be a 20 or 30-year-old woman or a little man in a skirt, and push through and imagine that we've still got testosterone like we used to. We don't. And imagine we can eat the shit that we used to. We can't. Imagine we can drink like we used to. We can't. Imagine that we can go to CrossFit or do 1 hour of a hard run each week, or do a whole bunch of hours on the treadmill and eat a lettuce leaf and we'll lose weight. We can't. Once we start going, this period of life, this peri-menopause, that period is a training ground. It is a time, it's a transition ground. It is a time to let go of, shed old habits, old patterns of behavior, and transform into this new vessel, essentially. You know,
Yeah. I like thinking about it as, you know, you spent your life creating other humans, right? So when you were fertile, you were creating, well, that was the purpose. But when you go through menopause, you start creating yourself. And that can look very different to the self that you used to be, right? So this is where your energy and your time, and this is also where you say to your husband and your kids, you know, screw all of you, because I actually can't be nurturing you anymore. I now need to nurture me. And it's so important, because if we don't nurture ourselves, if we stay in a place of sacrifice through those, or beyond those years, we develop illnesses that will eventually kill us early. So we need to be so sure that we are putting that nurture in the right way, whether it's with food, with rest, with good relationships. It is so important, because if you don't do it, you will die sooner, you know, you won't have quality of life. There'll be more morbidity, if not mortality. So, and I see that in the previous generation of women that were so often lived in sacrifice for so long that they just don't have good quality of life anymore. And I'm so grateful that we have the wisdom now. You know, we have the knowledge, we can access the knowledge. I'm very grateful to be living now as a woman going through menopause.
You would have heard me saying before, you know, we are the first generation who can say busy does not equal worthy, and be okay with that, and actually go.
Well, it took me a long time to be okay with that, but I'm getting there.
But it's a thing.
It's a transition, right?
It's a transition.
Rest is not just a 4-letter word.
Yeah, I like that. And you know, Sue and I were talking, weren't we, Sue, about until we show our daughters and the women around us, the younger woman coming up behind us, that we value ourselves and that we are worth the time. There's that lovely saying, you know, you are worth the time it takes to rest. Until we actually take the time and put the energy and the focus and the money and all the rest of it into really kind of revering our vessel, we cannot expect the woman behind us to do the same. And if we want our daughters to eat better, to respect themselves more, to take time out when they're exhausted to replenish, if we want them to you know, not self-sacrifice until they're ill, etc., we've got to demo that.
Yeah.
The only thing we can do, the only thing we can do that is effective is lead by example. Because no matter how much telling or educating or persuading, it ain't gonna work. My clients tell me over and over and over again, because this is one of the principles I coach: we don't coerce, we don't persuade. What we do is we lead by example, and people will follow. And it's quite dramatic, the effect that we get when we change with the food, when we change the way we're eating, how much those around us, particularly our kids and our partners, learn from us.
For sure.
So we
For sure.
can be the change, and this is what I want to see. I want to create a ripple effect by delivering this experience to many more people who are in a position to be able to help me create this ripple effect, yeah, so that we're reaching out to our communities. But I wanted to just throw in a point there, Linda, that we haven't touched on yet, and that is, it's all very well having the education and the knowledge, but that doesn't create change. It's so important to get guidance with this, because to create any lasting change, you need a process that works. And so to make changes with the way you're eating, it starts by adding in more nourishment, not swapping things out straight away. You've got to get more nourished first. And then when we do need to swap things out, like the sugar and the refined carbs, we're in a much better position to do that because we've had the mindset work, we're fully nourished, we've dealt with low blood sugar hunger, we understand emotional hunger, we understand cravings and compulsions. All that is key. You can't just make all these changes when you haven't had the training. So it's so important to be guided through this process so that you're doing things in the right order. And that when you do things in the right order, when you make one positive change, you feel better.
Yeah.
And when you feel better, you associate that one change that you've just made, whatever it is, with, when I do this, I feel better. And that's what creates lasting change. Not trying to do it all at once.
Yes, absolutely.
And you know, it's why I created Women's Wellbeing.me and in the Women's Wellbeing Pathway 1, 2, 3. So number one, the first thing is to unwind those tension patterns, to get embodied into your body, to be able to listen to your body, to be able to breathe properly, diaphragmatically. So we're out of that stressed sympathetic nervous system all the time and are able to actually access that parasympathetic state of calm adrenals, you know, so I hear you. And I know that for me, I needed guidance when I had my perimenopausal breakdown, and I theoretically knew a lot of stuff, but when I was at my lowest ebb, I really recognized that you know, at the bottom of the, felt like a huge cavern. I had to reach sideways. I always say to people, go sideways, go to the other women around you who have got the knowledge and can help you there before you try and do it all yourself, you know. Reach sideways. So yeah, I exactly like you have created things because it's now so important to me to help people to avoid the stuff that I went through and to be able to share information and practices that actually work. And essentially, I mean, for you, it's the education around nutrition, and like you say, the adding in. I mean, golly, in this bit of vegetables here, I've got so many different herbs and spices and various different vegetables, and in the mince I've got lentils as well, and lots, you know, celery and all sorts of different things, just trying to add it all in, add it all in.
And that's why I love a soup, because you can put so much in a soup and just blend it up. Yeah,
For
just
me,
had a
it's
big
the,
bowl of
you know,
soup.
the adrenal care, and then the bone and muscle strengthening, pelvic floor care, the things that us midlife ladies need to work on. And Irina is she's one of the UK's top pelvic floor physiotherapists, and I think that you know, if ladies, you haven't seen a pelvic floor therapist before, if you don't really know what's going on for you, it's really worth booking in to see somebody like Irina. She's mummy MOT trained. You actually do all the mummy MOT training, so it's the standard of pelvic floor physiotherapist. I think these women are angels put on this earth specifically.
God bless you. I think something I say to patients, and what I really encourage ladies to do, is to actually start having a look down there with the mirror and just look at what things look like, right? Because if you don't know what it looks like, you can't go to somebody and go, it doesn't look right anymore. You know, I had a patient coming today, and when I examined her, I said, when was the last time you had a look down here? And she was like, oh, a while ago. And I was like, oh, so have your labia minora always been quite small? And, you know, I kind of had to explain what I was talking about. And she's like, oh, no, they were kind of okay. And I said, but they're not there anymore. So she didn't realize that she had lichen sclerosis and it had flattened out her labia minora. She literally didn't have them anymore. but she'd been such a long time since she's looked down there, hasn't been in a relationship with somebody else. And I think the first relationship you can have with yourself down there is with you and yourself down there, right? It doesn't have to be a different person looking at things. It can be you. And just getting comfortable with how things look and feel inside, outside, you know, how your sensitivity is inside, outside. And getting familiar with your own body. And again, coming back to the feedback thing, you know, is your body still giving you the same feedback in that realm, whatever that looks like? So, but it's just this taboo subject that nobody wants to go and have a look or admit that they've had a look. Or, you know, one of the questions I always ask my patients is, you know, when they say, oh, this is what's happening with sex, and I'll go, and how's sex with yourself? Because it's very different, right? And that opening up the conversation that it's really okay and normal to do that, and that you want to know how things feel different. Because if you don't understand yourself, how on earth can somebody else be expected to understand you in that way, you know? So it's really important and healthy to know where you're at, because things will change. And if you don't know where you were, you're not going to know what that change looks like. It's not like losing weight or, you know, your face changing. You're not going to see it. So you need to go and have a look and a little feel and explore, take some time for yourself.
And you know, you're just like, you know, we get baggy around the eyes and here and all the rest of it. We lose tone. We do down below as well. And, you know, it is super important. Your sex life can be better than ever. It can be. It doesn't need to be diminished. And I going back to those key things that we wish we had known earlier, I wish I had known the impact on losing estrogen deeper in the pelvic bowl earlier. I wish I'd known about not, you know, being careful with lots of intra-abdominal pressure of, you know, jumping on a trampoline, running.
I'm with you there.
Yeah. I wish I'd known that, because I would have done things very, very differently. I think so often people, you know, put on weight around the middle. We're doing all the eating that we used to do in our 20s and 30s. We're feeling inflamed, exhausted. We have some more chocolate biscuits because, you know, we start to put on weight, and so we go, oh well, I better do some more running, and I better eat less chocolate biscuits and more just lettuce, just salads. And, you know, we end up putting too much intra-abdominal pressure on poor muscle fibers that have got no protein to strengthen them, lack of estrogen because we haven't used pelvic estrogen, we haven't been plumping up the pelvic floor muscles, the sphincter muscles, and you know, they can't contain what we used to do in our 20s and 30s. So I wish I'd known that. Listen, ladies, thank you so much for staying with our free flow dialogue today.
Our ramblings
on you know, some of the things that we feel have impacted our lives the most in this last sort of 10 years or so. I'm just going to ask anyone if they've got questions of the three of us. Anyone want to ask anything in particular before we wrap up today? Yeah, we are empowered in menopause conversation with GPs. Yes, Sam, absolutely true. When we know how to talk to our GPs, i.e. we've actually read about the different hormone therapy options that are there, we understand the difference between synthetic hormones, body identical hormones, and bioidentical hormones. When we have that base knowledge, we're able to use appointments so much more efficiently. So yeah, no, that's a really, really good point.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Any ladies, any other things that you would like to chip in with, what you wish you had done earlier, known and done earlier?
Can I just pick up on something that Elrina said about getting conscious around how, you know, looking in the mirror, how you look, how you feel? Well, the same thing applies with food. Getting conscious around how the way you're eating right now feels in your body. We don't want judgment. We don't want guilt. What we want is objective review and analysis. Objective analysis and review, right? How am I eating at the moment? How does it make me feel? How do I feel in my body after I've eaten this? How do I feel the next day? How do I feel about it emotionally? And it's that conscious awareness, like Elrina said, of how things are now, that when things change, then you're empowered to notice how much better things have got. This is the way I coach with the food. Then when you make some changes, it's like, oh yeah, that feels so much better. But a lot of us are just eating unconsciously, and we're not aware of how crap we feel if we've had a pizza, for example, or how, I know we all know what a hangover feels like, but are we tuned into what it feels like to have one glass of wine? Are we tuned into how it feels when we prep our own healthy lunch versus grabbing a sandwich? No guilt or shame, just tuning in to what things are like now so that you can become much more empowered when you make small changes.
Absolutely.
Swadhaya yoga, we call it Swadhaya, that self-observance, that ability to, almost sit outside of yourself with your clipboard and go, oh. Not adding story, not adding guilt, just going,
Isn't that interesting?
Isn't that interesting? I'll remember that for next time.
Swadhaya.
Swadhaya.
Swadhaya. Yeah. Right. I'm so glad there's a word for it, because I've been trying to coach it for years, but I didn't know there was a word for it.
Yeah. And then Santosha, when we're going, acceptance. Down there's not working well. Up here's not working well. This food and this food and this food and that alcohol doesn't work for me anymore. Acceptance. And that's the key ingredient to change. That's when we're going to change. Hooray! Thank you so much, ladies. You're amazing for coming and joining us, sharing your lunch with us. If there's no comments from any of you or questions, we will wrap up. I just want to say, Sue and Irina, please could you put in the chat where people can find you, your websites. I know, Sue, you've got a really useful free giveaway on yours. Irina, she's got, fantastic website, lots of information on that website. So I will put those on the recording. I'll send this out to you as well so that you can always listen back. But I think,
thank you for having us.
So, such a pleasure. Thank you for joining. I think the summary really is about treating this vessel with reverence and actually, starting to listen in and to reach out sideways. You're not on your own. We are all in this together. And when we as wise women collaborate, when we support each other, the younger women behind us are going to see that, and they are going to change just by osmosis. That's when we're going to start changing the world. And that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Ripple effect.
Exactly. Right, ladies, I've got to go. Have a lovely weekend.
Thank you all. Thanks
Lovely
for joining.
to see you all. Thanks for having me on.
You, Sue.
You too, Irina.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Oh, thanks, Sam, for that. Thank you. Thanks, Ivana. Thanks, Linda. Well done. Amazing. Thank you for all your comments. Great. Bye. Thank you. Happy World Menopause Day.